Hi everyone, this is Samrat, and I welcome you all to the Baseline Show. This is the General Assembly, the special assembly that we have at the beginning of every month, where we give you updates of the month that has gone by, and we also talk about the most ambitious projects that we are working on in the Baseline protocol, while we are trying to create the best community-driven multi-party coordination protocol. So here we have the OGs of Baseline. We have no new members today, but I would like to just go around the room and welcome everybody. Thank you all for making it today. Once again, we have Mark Haddle, we have Jack Waring, we have Andreas, Sonal, Jack Leahy, Mark Rimza, Keith Salzman, Yoav, and we have Ryan, and our very special guest today, we have Charles from the EEA. I'm getting feedback from some browser. Okay.
No.
Okay, so today, just like every monthly assembly, we are going to go through the various working groups, and we're going to talk about what's going on with them, the recent activities, and if there are any uh, support requests to the community, we will talk about those as well. And the second part of the show, we're going to be talking to Charles about the recently released ETH Trust security levels specifications version 1, and we're going to understand what it really means and how it's enhancing the confidence of people using smart contracts in general. Okay, so with that, I would like to call upon. Should we start with Mark? Mark, can we start with the outreach updates?
Absolutely. So probably first and foremost within the outreach team is 2 weeks ago, I presented on baseline protocol at the FinTech DevCon in Denver, which was sponsored by Move. And it wasn't one of your mega conferences like Money 2020. We had about 1,500 people in attendance and really got a good insight as far as the state of development, the state of innovation when it comes to financial services within fintech. A lot of the areas of focus are, of course, on privacy, governance, risk, and compliance. How do we basically conduct our operational environments in ways that we are not running afoul of any type of framework, such as they are, mainly because there are many frameworks that are just now coming online. And then there's some frameworks that have been around for a while that have been given enforcement action powers. They've been given badges and guns, as I say. So the onus to for compliance has taken a lot more intense attention right now. A lot of process environments, of course, certainly within lending, debt management, also within assets, digital and otherwise, the exchange, the settlement and clearing uh, aspects of that. And there's a lot of different solutions that are out there as far as privacy preserving APIs, but really I'm still trying to find one thing that's kind of has that killer app status within how to address these problems there. And baseline addresses many of that in a very tidy way. Um, and we got a lot of attention mainly because on several aspects. First of all was of course the multi-party coordination, to where we've got all the people that are just sitting around the same table working on the same data set. I mean, to use that illustration, and if you think about the process environments when it comes to underwriting or credit evaluation, you have a lot of external parties that need to collaborate, but the insight and the data itself is, of course, protected by these robust privacy frameworks and regulations that still people do not quite have that clear of a grasp of. And so knowing that, they're going to operate in a way that is not going to have them run afoul of any of those. So they start wondering, how can we actually coordinate? And that's why baseline got such an enormous attention here. Two things were certainly on the multi-party coordination, but also the zero knowledge aspect. that was something that really got a lot of people thinking about it, and they thought it just was absolutely cool because it was something different from the way that they're usually doing things. So one of the biggest things that we had to kind of seed the garden with was, how can I prove something to you without showing it to you? Just because as humans, we want to sit there and see it before we can believe it. And so I'd sit there and say, well, I can't show you the data. That's how it is. But the conversation doesn't start there. That doesn't stop there. So while I can't show you the data, I can show you a mathematical proof that proves, not just attests, not just assures, or makes a statement of certainty. We are proving that we are working off of the same data set. And that really blew, I mean, more than a few minds out there, because they're like, this is interesting, mainly because a lot of vendors, they want to be able to innovate, but within the data privacy framework, or at least the security practice, they're unable to, or they're not able to actually solve the problem in a manner that they want to. In light of these restrictions. And so that's the big thing about baseline, is you say this is as simple as it's supposed to be. We are not rearranging the furniture as far as your architecture. We are leaving your data privacy compliance and your security profile and your shared business logic as it was. We are just enabling it so that you can actually extend this to external parties that you deal with day in and day out, but you cannot actually share data. You may have been able to do that in the past, but you cannot anymore just because of privacy. So baseline is a very tidy approach that we can get all these people that are normally at arm's length away and bring them into a common structure to say, yes, you are aligned, you are synchronized, and you can go ahead and complete whatever workflow environment that you need to complete. It is that simple. And that's one of the things that we really had to try different approaches and re-explain it several times, just because people are like, this has got to be a lot more complicated than this. I've got to be, I'm used to, if I want to have any type of sea change within my data sharing environment or my participant environment, I'm going to have to buy something, or I'm going to have to rip and replace something. And we're like, no. And they're like, well, how can that be? And we're like, no, why make it more complicated than it needs to be? So that was one of the kind of the taglines that I repeated over and over again. And I think we probably need to incorporate it into some marketing going forward, is, we make it as simple as it's supposed to be.
Awesome.
So,
Awesome. And Mark, are there any memorable, maybe top 3 memorable chats that you had with people? Which industries were they from? Most interest that you gathered?
well, if I had to count as many, whoa, I mean, that would have been great. I mean, because and I got no shortage of them, because they're like, it's something that no one else has really thought of. And that's what gets everybody really curious and even excited about it, because it's like, wait a minute, we can sit there and prove that all these people that only come together, for this particular purpose, are able to actually complete their workflow environments in a fraction of the time. And they don't have to go through all of this back and forth, and they can show up with, wherever the multi-party environment, they get engaged and they can stay engaged and complete whatever workflow or work step that they need to go, instead of having to, okay, let's start this up and then walk away and wait until we have these reconciliation efforts, because we can't share the data or the insight. How can we keep everybody the trail from growing cold, as it was, but everybody is still there and focused on completing that particular workflow. So, and everybody's like, well, where would we actually use this? And I'm like, pretty much any industry that needs to share data, but they need to share data outside of, their enterprise. They have all of their different, counterparties that belong to different legal entities, but they need to come together for a common purpose. And this is how you can align them and make sure everybody is working off of the same data sets, uh, and be able to prove this constant state of synchronization. And so what are the ripple effects of that? Well, your cycle times go down to seconds. Your back office reconciliation is almost eliminated because you're not having to go back and forth and try and play games of Battleship or games of Go Fish to make sure, yeah, okay, we're actually working off of the same data set. So, and it's useful in not only the people that you regularly are going to be conducting business operations with, but it's also for the one-offs or the arm's length, the people that you would only maybe interact with once a quarter or maybe once a year, or somebody brand new. And so long as you can actually give them the onboarding process to say, yeah, we're bringing these people in, but they're not sharing any data across a fence. So it allows for that type of collaboration as well. We got quite a bit of enthusiastic response just because people are like, I really want to find out a little bit more about this.
That is
From the
awesome.
developers, yeah, as well as those people that are in operations and risk. Because the fact that, hey, you're leaving all of the big things alone, the security, the security profile, the data privacy, the shared business logic. You're just enabling them and making them go better. I'm like, this is where we get everybody sitting around a table and then saying, okay, get done what you need to get done.
Absolutely. Now, this is amazing, Mark. And for those of you, if you're watching us for the first time, you can go to baseline-protocol.org and check out all about Baseline and get involved. And also get Baseline. There's a very interesting button on the website, just get Baseline. You will be connected to one of our sponsors, and they will help you get Baseline ASAP. Thank you, Mark. This exciting news, and some amazing updates coming, and I'm definitely aware about many more outreach engagement that we're working on. Right, one of them which I can announce is the introduction of Baseline Protocol at an ETH event. It's a ETH community event being organized in Kuala Lumpur, and I will be speaking on that event sponsored by AWS and EtherScan, and it's happening on the 14th of this month. So that's pretty interesting, and also an upcoming event in ETH Vietnam that's also coming in the end of November. So those are some events we look forward to, and we hope to get as many people as possible, aware about baseline protocol and also get involved. Let me move to Mark Rimza now. Mark Rimza, do you have any updates for us on the outreach, on research working group? Yeah, over to you.
Yes, absolutely, I do. On the enablement work group, this isn't necessarily an update, but just a reminder that the new master enablement deck has been released. So please check that out on the website. It's available. You can check it out there. You can play around with it, turn it into a deck for your own uses whenever you're talking about evangelizing baseline. Beyond that, for the enablement work group, next up in our bi-weekly meetings, we're going to start working on a new standards focused deliverable. It's going to be something like something that should be in between the little bit video and the spec itself, something that'll make it easier for people to understand the standard, whether you're a developer, product person, anybody like this in a large enterprise who wants to understand the standard more at a glance. So stay tuned for that as we start working on that. Beyond that, in the enablement work group, maybe the outreach work group, it depends where this falls, but we're working on the SDO, standards development organizations. How can we reach out to them? Which ones are good? What would be beneficial for baseline? How can we start connecting with them and working with them? So those are the big three from the enablement work group right now. And then moving on to the research work group. The research work group is the new home of the Blip1 research efforts. So all efforts have been moved over to the research work group. We meet every other week on Thursday at 10 a.m.
Super.
Central Time and 5 p.m. Central European Time. And you can actually meet with us tomorrow. We're going to go through the next thing that we're working on with Blip1. So stay tuned and join us if you would like. And that's it for those updates. Back to you, Samrat.
Thanks, Mark. By the way, let me be the first person to say that the enablement deck looks just amazing. I recently saw it. It's truly come out really well, and I am glad Jack. I saw Jack already started posting some of those slides for evangelism on social medias. I think it's come out really well. Thank you, and congratulations to the group in general. Who worked on the deck.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And thank you to the team as well.
Super, super. I would like to join the research calls as well as frequently as I can. Okay, if we have, so I think we're missing Carol today, but we have Chet from Oasis. So, hello, Chet. Chet is not on video, but we're going to be listening to updates. Hi, Chet. Do you have any updates for us on the sponsorship side? Hey, I see you now.
All right. No, I don't have any updates. I checked in with Claudia this morning, and nothing came up. So I don't think you guys are waiting on anything from us.
Okay, awesome. We'll move on to the core devs updates. Now, this is something which I personally look forward to really, really curiously. I mean, I'm always very curious about what's going on with the core devs. I mean, that's the heart of all the action where stuff is getting built, and then we can have all the enablement and announcements we want to make. So let me bring in Yoav. Yoav, let's talk about what's happening.
All right. Thank you, Samrat. So the major kind of initiative that's going on right now, as far as core devs goes, is the SRI, the Simple Reference Implementation, which actually now is going by BRI 3 after some discussion in the community. So along with that, there is a grant request that was created and submitted since the last GA. And that request was voted and approved by the majority of the TSC. So there is now a active grant where we're putting our community funding to good use and furthering the development of the BRI 3. So that whole grant, which outlines the team members that are working on the SRI, as well as the motivation and the tasks and milestones and everything, can be found in the grants repo in the GitHub. So the team now is continuing their work on the different components that everybody has been kind of assigned from the initial planning phase. So to track all of that, we have different issues that are open in the main baseline repo, as well as the grant request itself will have somewhat frequent updates on it as the milestones are achieved. So coming up soon, hopefully, there will be also a blip that will detail the overall outline of BRI 3 and kind of what it's achieving and why, and we'll have links in one central place to everybody's issues and documentation and everything, just to kind of put everything in one place that can then be distributed out to where you need to be. So with that said, that's kind of the overview of where we're at since the last GA. So I think myself and 2 other members of the work group are on the call, so we can go ahead and give some more detailed updates of the individual components. So I will kick us off. I'm working on the storage aspects of BRI 3. So for me, I have 2 open issues, one of which is now fully checked off, which is the database preparation tasks issue. So that one was to create a local database, as well as programmatically spin up a Docker container with a database in it, and then connect to those databases and implement a migration library. The second issue is most of the way through. This is to send queries to these databases that have been spun up. So I have been able to make a connection to local and Docker, send queries, create tables, and do all of that. The last step is to implement an RM that will make it easier for everybody else's components to interact with this database. And Ogden will be joining me in that effort. So Monique, if you're on the call, if you want to give us your updates.
Hey, Manik, you're on.
Or maybe we can start with Keith. If you need a second, Monique.
Yeah, sure, we can do that. No problem. But also, my work is focusing on the workgroup workflow work step kind of component. So what's kind of usually referred to as one half of the core aspect of baseline, with another part of the team working on the subjects, PPI accounts, all that mishigas. And so right now there's 3 issues open. They have corresponding documentation. So far, we've detailed, interfaces and classes, just the bare bones interfaces and classes, what's going to be needed inside those 3 components, their constructors, so on and so forth. We decided on a separation between, what is going to deserve an interface versus a class, DTOs, and now with new implementation of Nest.js for the server-side framework, which Monique can talk about more because he had a heavy hand in that decision, good experience with that framework before. We're now starting to make the changes to implement through command handlers all the different CRUD APIs. And that's all. I'll pass it back to you. Back to you, y'all.
All right, Monique, you want to give us yours?
I'll
hand the baton.
over to you, Monique.
Hi, guys. So, yeah, thank you so much for the updates that you guys have given. So on my side, we have started working on the SRI component. So we have figured out some of the initial classes and interfaces and how these components are going to be interacting. And for a little bit change, we're going to be using Nest.js as the framework for this SRI implementation, which is going to be saving us quite a lot of the boilerplate coding. So we're going to be utilizing the Nest.js this time. So we have, utilized a new component for the ZKP also this time. So pretty much new things coming up down the line.
Thanks, Manik, for those updates. I think this is very promising, and yeah, we look forward to seeing Code Live sessions very soon on this show. Okay, there's some fun going on the chat, so you see a lot of us smiling, but that's good. Okay, so now that brings me to my updates. Okay, so Tsc updates, I can give you an updates on the recent grants approved. This is one SRI work is underway. The other grant which was approved was for myself to be carrying forward and launching or relaunching the consolidated baseline shows, and sort of engaging more guests before and after the shows, and trying to evangelize baseline with them within their organizations. I think that's something which I will be working on going forward very deeply. And also, let me use this opportunity to also talk about the open RFPs. There are 3 open RFPs currently within baseline where we are inviting companies to bid. There's the baseline test harness. We need to build that. We have posted about these open RFPs on our social media channels. It's also readily available. Anybody who wishes to explore them can come in to our Slack channels as well, and also explore our GitHub. So the first one is for baseline test harness. The second one is for incorporating DIDs and VCs into open source digital asset wallets. And the third one is for incorporating EDDSA keys into open source digital asset wallets. So those three. Andreas, could you quickly talk about these three open RFPs, just a basic introduction for anybody who's listening to us for the first time?
Sure, absolutely. So two RFPs, 1 and 2, are focused on wallets, right? So currently we have great digital asset wallets, but they're, and then on the one hand, and then we have wallets that don't do digital assets, but do DIDs and verifiable credentials really well. So RFP 1 is focused on creating a combined wallet, a unified wallet for DIDs, VCs, as well as digital assets. So we have one submission there, that grant submission that is currently in flight. Then the second one is due to the fact that, again, currently available wallets that are used throughout the ecosystem are very good in doing regular cryptography and digital signatures, but not the type that is optimized for our types of zero knowledge proofs, at least the more advanced types that we need to use, such as ZK snarks and ZK starks. And they require what are called specific type of elliptic curves and signature schemes that are called EDDSA. And therefore, that is currently not supported. And therefore, RFP2 focuses on integrating those integrating EDDSA cryptographic curves into digital assets wallets, such that you can manage not only your digital assets on Ethereum, but also on ZK rollups, and sign your baseline proofs that you're generating for your counterparty. So that's the short of those identity and ZK focused wallet RFPs. Then the third one is related to BRI3. It is we're asking for someone to create a test harness that can integrate with BRIs in order to prove that those BRIs are actually compliant with the standard. And that is I didn't hasten to say the RFP1 is for $30,000, RFP2 for $15,000, and lastly the test harness for BRIs is for $100,000. So if it will not buy you a shed in San Diego, but it might do some good in other parts of the world. So and might be appreciable amount. Plus, you will get the eternal gratefulness of not only the baseline community, but pretty much the entire crypto world. If you're addressing RFP1 and RFP2.
Which, let's be real, that's worth more than money. So
eternal gratitude and $100,000. I hope the right teams are listening to us.
Okay, if you want to do all three, yeah. I don't know about the eternal gratitude on the test harness, but that's why you spend more money on that. You're not getting the eternal gratitude.
For that. Okay, so I'm going to invite Sonal now to talk about the open items which the TSC is discussing currently. Sonal, if you could walk us through that. Thank you, Andreas.
Thank you. So those RFPs are key within the TSC discussions right now, as well as the upcoming TSC election. So before our next General Assembly, we will have had 2 more TSC sessions where Chet, Claudia, and the OASIS team will help us outline the process for the elections coming up. And I believe that means that sometime mid-October, we will shift into our 2022-2023 technical steering committees group. So with that, it's good to start keeping in mind that first, if you'd like to run for the TSC, I don't quite remember the criteria from last year, but I believe you provide a little blurb about yourself and your interests that will go out to eligible voters. And then a vote will be conducted. So if you're interested, start pondering that and reach out to myself or other community members so we can make sure you're looped in. And then if you would like to be an eligible voter, you'll have to have submitted a merged PR within the last calendar year. I know the ins and outs of that are still being outlined, like within which repos that would count from, because we have a few repos. Of course, the main baseline repo is the core one. But we do want a wide range of eligible voters as well as nominees for the TSC. And Chet, I saw you pop in for a sec if you'd like to cover anything there as well.
Yeah, Sonal, I was just going to note that as part of that process, we'll put out a call for nominations in advance of the period so that everybody will get an email, saying, reply and put your name in if you want to be considered.
Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, that's a major update coming from the TSC. And then as the end of the year nears, we will review our roadmap from this year, which of course we bit off more than we could chew on purpose, just to have a plan in place of future roadmaps down the line. So we'll kind of address what we've accomplished this year and what priorities will become for next year. So as soon as 2023 begins, we can have our next roadmap published, probably a little more granular than the current one, but there was kind of a method behind that for this year. But looking forward to future TSC updates and those elections.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to the road mapping exercise once again. Thank you so much for bringing that up. And ladies and gentlemen, look out for that call for nominations email. Okay, with that, we move on to the standards update. Andreas.
Yes, standards update. We are still a bit in a holding pattern until the PGB has defined the final process and requirements for both the draft EA communities projects specification draft and final specification. So in the meantime, we are generating with BRI3 a fully functioning reference implementation that is then being used by the community. I presume which we can use as our second. That's the anticipated requirement, is that two reference implementations are up and running and are being used. B. We have done improvements. Thank you, Charles, here. Shout out. We have now included, with his help, we were able to include alt text in all our figures, such that people with disabilities have, especially visually impaired, have the ability to participate in the discussions and can contribute and understand what the specifications say. So that those PRs have been merged. There have been some editorial PRs in the meantime, but as far as the main components are concerned, we're in a holding pattern at this at this moment.
Okay. Okay.
However,
thanks for those updates. Yeah.
However, we are now offering, if people are interested and want to learn more about the specs and the ins and outs and the details, we're offering Q&A sessions after each baseline show, including this one. So if people are interested, have questions about the spec and how certain requirements could be met and what it means, that's what this is all about. Great.
Thanks for those updates, Andreas, and especially the accessibility update. I think that's amazing, and that opens up us to many more participants. Thank you for that. The link to the standard I've just posted on YouTube, so people are watching us online are able to see that link. I forgot to mention James Harsh from EEA. He's also here today with us, and he's doing a fantastic job on the memberships, the EEA. Thank you so much, James. We now move on to our guest for today. I think, Charles, I hope we've not bored you with all this, and thank you once again for making it to the show at such short notice. We are really excited to hear from you about the eTrust security level specification V1 that is recently launched on 25th August. So over to you.
Thank you, and thanks for having me, everybody. So yeah, I'm the Director of Technical Programs at the EEA, and the eTrust security levels specification is the newest thing we've released. It's been around, it's been formally published for a few weeks. In line with most EEA core work, the specification has actually been publicly viewable since pretty much before it had any actual content. So you can always watch the ongoing development from roughly the first scratch version. What I'm going to do is paste a URL into the chat so that people can follow along in their own style. And then I'm going to share my screen and show you what I'm looking at with the specification. I'm going to give a very brief overview of the spec itself, because in essence, it's quite a simple beast. It's a set of requirements to ensure that if a smart contract written in Solidity has been reviewed for security, that a large number of known security vulnerabilities have been checked for. There are about 107, 108 requirements overall, and they come in several levels. What I'm actually going to do is skip to the section in the table of contents on how to read a requirement. Then I'm going to mention the security considerations section, but not look deeply in it. And then I will look at a couple more requirements. So how to read a requirement. The requirements have a level, a security level, a name, a URL, a statement of requirement, and in pretty much all cases, they also have some explanation. And so this example is actually a direct copy of the requirement in situ. The name is no exact balance check. The level is S. I'll talk a little bit more about the levels. If you click on the little link thing after the name of any requirement, that will take you to its permanent URL, so you can always go and find this requirement. One of the things that we actually commit to doing is if we update the spec and remove the requirement, the URL for that requirement will still be there, and there will be a statement something like, this requirement was removed because it's redundant, or because we discovered it was very badly written or something in a future version. As you can see, the actual requirement is that the tested code doesn't check specific values for Ethereum. And there's a little bit of an explanation of why. There's a pointer to some other requirements that deal with similar themes. And there's pointers to external security work that is related. I said I'd mention the levels. The levels are S, M, and Q, and they are a basic static analysis. It's completely automatable. A manual analysis of the code itself, which provides a higher level of thoroughness, because there's stuff that an automated analysis won't pick up, but a skilled auditor can look at it and say, hey, wait a minute, that's not quite right. Or, yes, I see there's this feature which is potentially risky, but the usage here is completely fine and there's no reason to be concerned about it. And Q, which is the sort of full quality check, that's a very in-depth review, and that actually covers code quality. It requires that the code actually has documentation of the business logic, and that it does what the documentation says it does. So if you write a contract which claims to help the universe and provide 3 ETH a week to everybody who participates in baseline, but actually what it really does is steals ETH from everybody and makes it look like it's handing stuff and then gives it all to me, that would fail such a requirement because it doesn't do what it says on the box. And we finally have some good practices. So the last kind of feature of how the thing is put together is an overriding requirement. And we go on about those because we use them a lot. In many cases, and no TX origin is a simple requirement. It's very easy to automate it, to run a code check and say, there is no TX origin statement. So that's fine. We know that there are people who do use TX origin. We know that there are use cases where it's not harmful. So there is an overriding requirement which requires a fairly in-depth check because it's a very dangerous feature. And if you meet the requirement that the TX origin usage that you have is actually safe, then you can pass the underlying requirement. So essentially this provides a way, if you do a quick automated check and it flags up, there is one TX origin statement, or there is one assembly instruction. Normally that would fail, but an auditor who checks the overriding requirement can say, yes, it's an assembly instruction. It adds 3 variables to get a number. It's not clear why you would do that, but it is clear that this is not being done in a way that introduces any vulnerabilities. So pass the requirement, give the thing a check. As I said, I'd mention security considerations. Those are in fact a generic discussion, or generic, if you will, a discussion of various aspects of smart contract development where things can go wrong or are known to go wrong. Security considerations is a very common component of a lot of technical specifications in the Web 2 space and in the internet space in general. Many people expect to find it. And it's helpful to give a more narrative introduction to some of the big themes. The requirements, there are, as I said, 100 odd, and they say, this is what you don't do. They give a brief explanation, but some people will want to learn more from the spec itself. And of course, some people want to go further. So in the security levels, we explain what the different levels are. I'm going to show the compiler bugs section of level S, because there are about 50 odd compiler bugs at level S. Each of these are things that were coded into some level of the Solidity compiler infrastructure, and then later discovered to cause a security problem, or potentially cause a security problem. They're ordered here from newest to oldest in terms of when was this fixed. So the first of the compiler bugs in this spec says that you mustn't do something using a version older than 0.8.15. Because they're ordered from newest to oldest, if you use a newer version than this, then you will also successfully pass all of the other compiler bugs. So you've achieved half the requirements of the spec just by using 0.8.16 or newer. It may be, for example, that you don't copy byte arrays from call data or memory and use the push, and so actually 0.8.15 is fine for a particular contract. So I've mentioned briefly the different levels of requirements. Security level Q holds documentation requirements, access control requirements, things that require fairly careful analysis. There are also some recommended good practices, and I'll show those. And they are essentially things where we don't have a sufficiently clear statement of requirement to be confident that any 4 auditors would actually agree on whether you've done it or not. These are often things where there's a lot you can do, and the more you do, the better. In some cases, they're actually things where if you do it badly, that might not be better than not doing it all. There are things where a bad implementation is actually worse than no implementation at all. And so there are just over half a dozen of these, and they include things like following accepted standards. This is one where it's great to follow ERCs, but you actually need to do that intelligently and thoughtfully. Just throwing every ERC you find into your implementation can be as much a recipe for disaster as a recipe for success, and helping people by using well-known patterns. Writing clear code. This is one where everybody agrees that this is what you should do, but it is impossible to get detailed agreement on what exactly that means. And so we provide some guidance. It's always a good thing to do this, and this is how you go. So that is the state of the specification today. It's been released, as I said, a couple of weeks ago, roughly. The working group, which has had participation from a dozen odd organizations, names that are very clearly security companies, people like Trail of Bits, OpenZeppelin, Hacken, QuantStamp, in organizations like Consensus, where you've had people from Diligence, but also from other parts which are not actually part of the Diligence security crowd. You've had OpenZeppelin, I guess, do more than just security. And organization, Banco Santander, primarily they're a bank, but being a big bank who care about what they do with the assets at risk, they have a security group who reviewed this stuff. Microsoft, EY actually maintain a testing tool for checking smart contract security, and so the people from that group were part of the participation. I want to thank two individuals, Chris Cordy of Splunk, who did a huge job chairing the group for a long time, is still the chair of the group, and Ben Town of SAE, because both of those people have done a lot of work on the spec. All of the contributors put in effort, produced reviews, produced comments that are actually very valuable and helped us make the spec good. Those two people did a huge Herculean effort of repeatedly doing that far beyond what normal people do. Where to next? Obviously, security is a dynamic space. The group expects that we will have to update this spec for several reasons. One is we're pretty sure that we have not actually produced the perfect explanation of all of the points that we've written in. So people will, as people deploy this spec and use it, they'll say, well, this is kind of ambiguous, or there are two ways of reading this. And we will take that feedback and see what people have actually done and try and improve that. We're sure that people will discover new security vulnerabilities. So we will need to actually have new content. Those two things are the big things that drive it. And then we are sure that there are things that we just got wrong. Straight out mistakes that we've made. Certainly at an editorial level, we know there's some typos and some spelling mistakes. We will fix those, but you don't write a new version based on the fact that you added 3 full stops and corrected a spelling mistake. But we do expect a real new version. At the same time, we're working on adding more links to test cases, showing vulnerabilities in action or showing code that is not vulnerable to a specific thing. And we're looking to deploy those. The EA runs a testnet, which is it's ephemeral. You tear it down and start again with a new configuration whenever you feel like. So it's not like a Robston or a long running testnet. It's designed to enable people to, play around with a configuration or a setup and then change that and see what happens. But the testnet group is building tooling so that we can deploy specific contracts and run specific transactions and check things. So we will put that example code onto the EEA testnet for EEA members to play around with and for people to see what's happening. One question that has been asked many times is, who can use this spec as a certifier? What do I have to do to say something conforms to this specification? We don't have a certification program. We don't check whether people are doing this correctly or not. At the end of the day, we rely on people who say they are security auditors and making claims that something meets a set of requirements. First, in most cases, it's pretty straightforward to pick up the spec yourself. Right? Not every individual on the planet, but many, many people are capable of picking up the spec and seeing whether they really checked it. And so putting your reputation on the line and saying, yes, I stand behind this claim. What's at stake is your reputation or your organization's reputation. And that is what we're using as the security, if you will, for the security evaluation. It's kind of like an outsourced or a more public and less formalized proof of stake. If you say you did a check and you didn't do it, you're likely to get found. And when you get found, you're likely to be shown up as not actually being what you claim to be. And for the current situation, we think that that's actually a reasonably solid basis to be working from. The whole point is that this is enabling many organizations who do security checking to point to a piece of work which they have agreed with their competitors, or in some cases which their competitors agreed, and they're just saying, look, we are doing the same thing that all our competitors do, because this is what the industry recognizes is required to set a minimum level of quality. I would say a quality baseline, but of course that term might be misinterpreted. So that's a quick intro to what we have, to where we're going. You're welcome to join the EA and participate in the further development, in the development of supporting materials, or just to pick up the spec and use it, because anyone on the planet can do that.
Thank you so much, Charles. This is really interesting stuff, and we would definitely want to, in future shows, maybe also explore how baseline can work towards the standard or use the standard, or potentially, the way I see it, potentially two applications coming together, trying to integrate with each other and baselining their security specs using baseline. Okay, so thank you once again, Charles. This was really interesting, and I hope that more and more people get involved. And crazy. Okay, somebody dropped. So I hope that more and more companies pick up this standard and start auditing using this. Let us also bring in the newer section that we introduced starting today's baseline show, which is talking about the baseline standard work which is happening, and we are trying to address any questions, any outstanding questions there may be, and let's also use this as an open platform for asking questions to Andreas about the standard. And for Andreas, let's make it standards 101, baseline protocol 101.
Sure. So sorry, I had to, there was some noise. Essential. That's very true, because baseline uses CCSMs, consensus controlled state machines, and they as the anchor layer, and it's actually required, and that means smart contracts. Whether those are Solidity smart contracts or written in other languages is really irrelevant. In fact, minus the compiler bugs, I would say a lot of the security requirements are directly transferable to other smart contract languages. Charles, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the work has been done over a period of about 15 months. And in the beginning, we went back and forth on whether we would restrict it to Solidity at all. In the end, it was a pragmatic constraint we put on ourselves to do something faster and to get it more complete. Solidity is the largest language used, or the most common language used. But yeah, there are plenty of other ways that you could look at this, and most requirements are based on how the EVM works. And so, if you decompiled your contract, you would be doing similar stuff.
Yeah, and there are only so many ways how deterministic execution frameworks can actually be built. There's there's a relatively limited design space. So coming back to the standard. The standard does not prescribe, obviously, the to use smart contracts, but it's definitely helpful if you are, for example, want to fulfill some of the should requirements around zero knowledge proofs. Right, so the standard talks extensively about zero knowledge proofs, and had as a should requirement that they should be verifiable on the CCSM, which is a fairly stringent requirement and cannot be met by many chains. In fact, it's because it requires that you can have precompiles for elliptic curve operations, which are basically there to verify still knowledge proofs, and obviously there are limitations on the type of elliptic curves that are supported by those CCSMs, and that also limits the prover systems that can be utilized. In fact, if you look at what is done on Ethereum with, for example, with ZK rollups, you're limited to a very specific curve, BN254 for those interested, and it's a not, you know, there are better curves that are more secure and more optimized for what people are trying to do. So there are interesting trade-offs. So obviously, as our friends from the maintainers group, you know, outlined, the standard talks about storage requirements, both for and different types of storage, centralized versus decentralized / distributed. It talks about requirements for work steps and work groups. In particular, about talks about required policies for that, and the relationships between work groups and work steps, and in fact workflows, which is something which is very important, because work steps are put together into workflows, which are then managed by work groups, one or more. So that is all outlined. The standard also talks about the type of accounts that exist in baseline. So similar to what people are maybe used for Ethereum, there are accounts for BPI subjects. These are can think of the equivalent as EOAs in Ethereum, and then you have BPI accounts, which are owned by one or more BPI subjects, and can be compared to smart contract accounts on Ethereum as a simile. So in order just to give you some helpful mental models here. And then obviously the spec talks about how all of these work together through an abstraction layer. In other words, middleware. What happens when you orchestrate requests through through accounts and work groups, workflows, work steps, and how this interacts with the CCSM. And then at the very top, we're talking. So I went sort of like bottom up. We're talking about what type of API standards that have been defined, and then also what are these certain things mean, and what is required to even start or talk about baselining. So what is an agreement? What's a contract? How does this tie into with data privacy, et cetera. So there's and then we're also since we're talking about counterparties in agreements or contracts, we're also talking about enough requirements around how you identify these counterparties, and what is required, and how those identities are then related to BPI subjects. Yeah, so that is at a very high level, sort of like the structure of the standard. Everybody can look at it. It also, oh, I forgot. There's also a section on interoperability between different baseline protocol implementations. So if you want to do cross BPI calls, so to speak. Yeah, so you can find it in the standards GitHub. I don't know whether you can paste that, and then let's open up the floors. Yeah, so anybody can take it out and check it out, and please review. If you find something that's unclear, that's unhelpful, that can be improved, open an issue, and we'll address it. The standards working group, even though it's not meeting regularly, it is still nonetheless working and reacting to PRs and issues in a very timely manner.
Absolutely. So so yeah, I think I've displayed the link to the standard on the video. We are 5 minutes over the scheduled time for the show today. So thank you. I think that brings us to a logical conclusion today. Thank you all for making it to the General Assembly once again, and keep baselining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.